These test tubes contain saliva. Inside the saliva may be the key to answering one of the burning questions of child development. Is the stress of modern living too much stress for a child?
Stress is certainly a hot topic. There's a very clear link between levels of stress and levels of mental health problems in populations. What we've seen from 1950 onwards is a steady rise in rates of mental health problems, particularly for children and adolescents. And we know that some of the major predictors of mental health problems in children and adolescents is the level of stress and the level of social support for the parents and for the kids.
In this first year of life, if a child is stressed, it will probably be because their parents are stressed. So we asked our parents the key question on stress from the longitudinal study. How often are you rushed or pressed for time?
I'd say often.
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 Actually, almost always.
Sometimes.
Often.
Often.
Sometimes.
At the moment, often.
Probably often.
Yeah, pretty much always lately.
Always. With Anthony.
Always.
We need a bit of stress in our lives to keep us alert, to keep us going, but we also need to have that burst of stress that then is managed and drops again. It's when stress remains high constantly that we're in real problems. And that's the real concern with the way our society is organised today, is that we put people in situations that do leave them chronically stressed.
How difficult do you feel your life is at present?
To find out if Australian families are too stressed, the longitudinal study asks behavioural science questions.
How well do you think you're coping?
In Life at One, we add some biological science. We trawl the saliva of our parents and babies for a hormone called cortisol. When we're stressed, our physical response and the emotions we feel are triggered by chemicals released in our body. First is adrenaline, providing the increased heart rate every kid needs to escape a bully. But if the threat continues, our body goes on high alert and cortisol kicks in to shut down parts of the brain.
And the things that we shut down are things like rational thinking, memories, our immune system, and a range of other things that, I guess, through evolution, our body has determined that aren't necessary to deal with the immediate trauma.
But if a child is continually stressed, constantly shutting down their memory and immune system can seriously affect the way their brain grows.
The growth of the child from birth onwards is really one of the remarkable periods of growth. The brain through this period of time is developing as many connections as it possibly can. There's some 50 trillion connections at birth, and this increases to 1,000 trillion by the time the child is 3 years old. It's really as if the brain is getting ready for what the possibilities might be.
A child's world is full of new experiences which stimulate the growth of their brain. As they learn to walk, to talk, to socialise and to remember, the essential connections they need are being made in the higher thinking part of the brain. But when a child is continually stressed, most of the action switches to the emotional or lower part of the brain.
The parts of the brain that are dealing with the increased alertness, the increased vigilance, all those parts of the brain are being stimulated again and again and again. And that means they get wired up really strongly. Now, along with that means that the parts of the brain that deal with the thinking and the memory, remember cortisol shuts those down. So those parts of the brain are not being stimulated as much because they're being shut down while that cortisol's floating around in the system. And so they're not getting wired up as strongly.
At around 3 years old, we prune the connections we're not using to make the brain work efficiently. If a child is stressed continuously, it's the thinking part of the brain that gets pruned. They then become trapped in the emotional part of the brain, where every new experience is viewed as a threat. It's a process of use it or lose it.
And so what we're seeing in children who are growing up in situations of chronic stress is we're seeing what we label as hyperactivity, hypervigilance, impulsivity, all of those things because of the way the brain has become wired because of those experiences in those first few years of life.